بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask him to send peace and blessings on our Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, it is from the kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He sends His friends among His ummah. And every now and then, in each century, in each generation, there'll be certain outstanding people of taqwa. We give them different names, but generally they're known as the awliya, the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One such great personality, Shaykh Abdul Qadir Gilani rahimahullah. And it's something, especially those from the subcontinent, they would hear his name in certain contexts. But very few probably know what he even spoke about, what his life was like, or what his speeches. So I have a few books on my bookshelf of his speeches and letters and so forth. And when you read those letters and you read the sayings, many people that maybe claim they have some association or they know about, they probably never read a book about his life. It's a sad reality. Not just him, many ulama names they get thrown around. But the reality of their life, how they spend their days and nights, probably is unknown. What their speech is like. This is a book I got back after 7 years. I lent it to a friend. Got I think after 7 or 8 years. I finally got it back from him. He borrowed it. He never read it. I think he read like 2-3 pages of it. Then every time I asked him, "Can I have my book back?" So it's a book. Wouldn't say it changed my life, but it had a big impact. And that was my introduction to Shaykh Abdul Qadir Gilani, because he's one of those great personalities you can say in the top 10 of this ummah. You know, that's, if you see, there's a book, Da'wat wa Azimat, Tarikh Da'wat Azim, Abu Hassan Nadwi rahmatullah alayh. In English it's called Saviors of Islamic Spirit. I think in Arabic it's called Rijalud Da'wah. It's written in Arabic and Urdu and in English. But it's an amazing book because it talks about the big personalities in each century almost. You could say the Mujaddids or the Revivers or the big people had a huge impact on the Ummah. Like Shaykh Abdul Qadir Gilani, like Imam Ahmad Hanbal rahmatullah alayhi, like Salahuddin Ayyubi rahmatullah. Like each of these people like this, when the Ummah was going off track, Allah sent certain, out of His rahmah, sent certain people that they changed the trajectory of the ummah brought it back to the Quran, back to Sunnah, back to the Deen, back to the apparent Sharia, the internal aspects of Islam. You know, like when the ummah was getting too much dunya, or dunya wealth started to come, then Allah sends people like Hassan Basri, that his whole talk was about indifference to the dunya, turning away from dunya. That when the Muslims were at their peak and they were, Baghdad was the greatest intellectual, economic powerhouse, then Allah sends someone like Imam Ghazali in the middle, who's from the institutions, who's sitting next to the Khalifa, and then he throws it all away and turns away from it, and he becomes Imam Ghazali, and his books that he wrote after 10 years of being cut off from all. I mean, this is the kindness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this ummah. And one of those people is Shaykh Abdul Qadir. So I'll read something of his speech that we may reflect upon. And the actual first thing that I read, because I was overseas, and one brother, Sheikh from Perth, he was coming out of a bookshop, and I saw him. I said, he had this book in his hand. I said, what's his book? And so in the beginning of the book, so, young man, wrap up the admiration for your deeds, come to me like a bankrupt person. The one who loves the Sunnah loves me, the one who hates the Sunnah hates me. I said, what kind of person who's this? How can you talk like this? He's like, his advices are timeless, and his life is not known to many people, and we have hundreds like this. But if you don't know your top 10 of the people who had the biggest impact, the ummah is benefiting from them till now. Like Jalaluddin Rumi, like Saaliheen, but their words are timeless, and I remember they did a Millennium edition, 2000 edition of Time magazine, and in that they put one of the people they put in there for each century, according to non-Muslims, that the most impactful person. So they put Salahuddin Ayyubi. For in that generation, he's the greatest person, and also for them as well. And they put his words. They wrote his words that he spoke when on the conquest of the Fath of Quds of Jerusalem. He said, "Not a hair in the body of a Christian is to be touched today, that they will never forget this kindness that we showed them." The strange thing is that they didn't forget. Allah preserves. لَوْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَى اللَّهِ لَا بَرَّ. Some people, they swear, they take an oath by Allah, and Allah fulfills it. The friends of Allah, they say words and Allah preserves them because of their ikhlas, because of their love for Allah, because they're saying that talk is out of pure sincerity. It's only for the sake of Allah. It's not for showing, it's not for people, it's not for any worldly, it's nothing. It's really, they speak only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They keep quiet for Allah and they speak for Allah. So Allah preserves their words. So even exactly what he said, he goes, they'll never forget these words. So, hundreds and hundreds of years later, they write it in their own publications. They quote those words. So it's and one of those people I wanted to mention to you, the Shaykh Abdul Qadir Gilani rahimahullah, and I want to read something from him to you, and maybe food for thought. Everybody wants to talk about the vaccine. I'm sick of talking about and answering the questions for it. He said, he rahimahullah said, "Do not occupy yourself with washing the clothes of your body, yet leave the clothes of your heart dirty. Wash the heart first and then wash the clothes. Combine both acts of washing, both acts of purification. Wash your clothes clean of dirt and wash your heart clean of sins. Do not be conceited of anything, for your Lord is fa'alu lima yurid. He is a doer of what he wills. Therefore, it has been reported about one of the righteous people that once he paid a visit to his brother in Allah Azza wa Jal and said to him, 'O my brother, let's weep over the foreknowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal about us. Let us cry that Allah knows about our end, about our future. Let us cry over this. How excellent is the saying of this righteous man. He was a knower of Allah Azza wa Jal, and he has heard the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of you may act as the people of paradise acts, until nothing remains between him and between it, that is Jannah, other than a distance of a cubit or a span, a hand span. Then the divine decree comes to pass, and he acts as the people of the fire, and he therefore enters the fire. And any of you may act as the people of the fire, and act until nothing remains between him and between it other than the distance of a cubit or a hand span. Then the divine decree comes to pass, so he acts the people of paradise act, and therefore he acts as the people of paradise act. He does one action just before he dies, and he becomes the people who enters Jannah. O young man, the foreknowledge of Allah about you will be unveiled to you when you return to Him, with all your heart and your aspiration. Stick to the door of His rahmah, His mercy. Build a barrier of iron between yourself and lustful desires. Keep the grave and death under the eyes of your head and your heart. Become watchful of the looks of the true one, Al-Haq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at you. His foreknowledge about you and His presence near you. Feel content with poverty. Become satisfied with bankruptcy. Be content with little and adhere to the limits of the law of the Sharia, which are the abiding by the commandments, observing the prohibitions, and enduring with patience whatever comes your way by destiny. If you keep to this, you will meet your Lord and enter with your innermost being into His presence. At this point, things will be unveiled to you. The people of Allah doze off only out of necessity. They sleep only out of necessity. Among them there is one who deliberately puts himself to sleep for 1 hour in the night to help himself to do tahajjud for the remainder of the night. He grants his lower self some of its needs so that it quiets down and does not hurt him. One of the righteous people used to force himself into sleep in some nights and prepare himself for without him having a real need for it. He was asked about this practice and said, "My heart sees my Lord Azza wa Jal." He added, the ihsan is a goal in deen, that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that as though we see Him, or at least that feel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing us. He says, "My heart sees my Lord Azza wa Jal. He has uttered the truth in what He said, because the true dream is an inspiration from Allah Azza wa Jal. The delight of his eye was in his sleep. As for the person who is brought near to Allah Azza wa Jal, There are angels devoted to looking after him in every moment. When he sleeps, they sit at his head, at his feet, to protect him from any danger, that he may come in front of him or behind him, while shaitan stands away from him and does not dare to come near to him. He sleeps under his protection, awakes under his protection, and moves and stops under the protection of Allah Azza wa Jal. O Allah, put us under your protection under all circumstances. Give us the Rabbana atina fi dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adhaban nar. These are some words that the whole book of speeches actually, but this is how the great ones spoke, and their majlis from beginning till end was a majlis of akhir. Imam Ahmad Hanbal rahmatullah alayhi has mentioned that no dunya was discussed in his majlis, and he said 500 came to study with him. Those students sitting in front of him, there's 500 come to study, learn hadith, to write his hadith, his chain of narrations, and 5,000 came to watch him. May Allah give us people like that. That 5,000 came to watch him and study him, his example, his moving, his walking, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it that always you need a role model, an uswa to hasana, most ideal is perfect, but we also need practical demonstration of people who follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's mentioned, one of the ulama was mentioning that somebody asked the sheikh, the students asked, how did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walk? So he said, give me time to practice. So 6 months he practiced, read all the hadiths and then apply. He said when is mentioned by a very famous alim, never met him in real life, he passed away in the 90s. I saw him in a dream, but that doesn't mean anything. But he said that in 1 million people you could see, because he followed the sunnah of walking like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's so much attraction in the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that in 1 million people that he would stand out because of the way he walked. Those details, Shamal Tirmidhi, we can have a look in there, the details of the walking of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I didn't want to talk about the benefit of the community. It's not an announcement. There is no official stance of the masjid on this regarding, because so many questions get asked about the vaccine. It's off the topic, but it's something that, see, Muslims speak about what they know, and if you don't know, you say I don't know. Whether it be in the medical field, whether it be in fatwa, if you don't know, say I don't know. You know, and a simple rule for fiqh when it comes to medical fatwa, it is, I mean, I've heard all sorts of weird things this last few weeks. You know, the microchip, I heard everything, like all sorts of strange things. But when it comes to medical fatwa, you go to the experts of the field, which are the doctors. And the ulama put the one condition in the fatwa, go to a pious practicing doctor. Some ulama don't even have that condition, go to the expert of the field. They go to a practicing Muslim doctor and take the advice from your personal doctor or from a Muslim doctor to make sure this is halal. As for the hukum of the vaccine, I'll just mention briefly, the ulama differ on this, depending on the way you look at it. If it's for the public good and so forth, some ulama will say it is, the most larger majority view is it's permissible. It's not wajib, it's not fard. It's permissible, it's mubah. Some ulama say, some of the Shafi'is and Hanbali ulama say it's mustahab, sunnah, it's good to do. A few ulama will say that it's compulsory because it protects the elderly and the weak, and in Islam we don't harm, and life is precious, we protect life. This is the hukum of it. As for people making their own individual decision about themselves, this is about the fatwa. A person is hur, he's free. In reality he's free, he can decide, he can wait longer, he can do it later, he cannot do it all, that's an individual decision. Your job might have a different view. They might take the fard view. The airlines might take fard. Definitely in the Hajj, as they made it compulsory. So, you know, they said no jab, no Hajj. That's what are you going to do then? If you want to go Umrah or Hajj, you're stuck now, isn't it? You can't. You have to do it now. For that, if you're going to do it for that, you have to follow the laws of the land, and that's their rule. You can't come in until, and probably here they'll make some rule about traveling and so forth as well. But as Muslims, like, we have bigger issues. We have our akhirah to worry about. Instead of and I mentioned this, there are real conspiracies, real zulm is done on Muslims in the last 200 years. Real things that we're only finding out now, after 50 years, 100 years, what they did to, in Algeria, the French did to in Algeria. We found after 50 years, oh, they did this, they killed so-and-so. They release, they seal the documents. When everything's died, their grandchildren have died, then we find out what really happened. There are real conspiracies, real wrong things that have happened. In our own lifetime, we saw the weapons of mass destruction lie that was perpetrated by even our government here. And so these are real conspiracies that happen. But a Muslim has to be very careful. There's a bigger picture, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's in charge of everything. And there's akhiras coming, and real justice will be done there. We have to be very careful as Muslim, what we forward in messages, what we say to people, what we comment on, because we are held liable before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it happens, let's assume the vaccine works, 100% it works. They say 80% efficacy, 95% it will work. It's not 100%. Even if you get the vaccine, it's not a guarantee that it'll work. But let's assume it's 100% it works. But because of my false information that I'm spreading, someone didn't take it. And then they got the virus and they died from the virus. Am I liable before Allah? People have to be very careful because you're going to be held accountable for your statements. That's what Rasulullah ﷺ said to the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, who didn't know that Sahabi that were traveling in the night time, he had fard ghusl, had a wet dream, he had to make fard ghusl. He made the ghusl and he got hypothermia, he died from it. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, why didn't you make tayammum? You killed your brother. So people, if I don't know, because this is a health issue. If I don't know, then, and I spread false rumor, and somebody believes that, because people are very innocent. People are sending money to Nigerian princes. Since I was a teenager, I've been hearing these Nigerian princes. No offense to any Nigerian brothers here, but we've been getting these emails. I've been getting these emails. Allah alam where they're coming from. So it's how much. Like people are still gullible. They still send money in 2021. They still send money. They might take your word seriously, or maybe what you got, and you might look at it with skepticism, and you just pass it on. That person passes it on, and it reaches a person, and they didn't take it because of that. So if I'm not an expert, I haven't studied in the field and so forth, it's a very dangerous thing. And this, back to what I said a few months ago, Neem Hakim, Khatar Ja, Neem Mullah, Khatar Iman. That half a doctor is a danger to your life. And half a mullah, half an alim is a khatara, is a danger to your iman. And Shaykh Hamza Chaudhry from the US, he said, they seem to have both teamed up. He said, and don't join their team. And Allah give us understanding and tawfiq to practice what we're saying here.